Welcome to Community Connection, your window to the world around you. And we are with Miss Lori Tanous. She is a lawyer and former Border Customs officer. She was also appointed as CEO of the Institute for Border Security and Logistics in 2015. Lori wears a lot of hats, and we welcome you to Community Connection.
Thank you. My pleasure to be
Lori,
here with
thank you for being here. Border Patrol, immigration, all these things are definitely prevalent in the news, in the political elections that you're seeing on this side of the border.
Most definitely.
And you are right in the middle of all of that. Tell us about your position. Tell us about what you did formally and how you became the CEO for the Institute for Border and Security Logistics, which sounds amazing. So talk to us.
It's interesting. So I started off my career as a Customs and Immigration Officer at the Canada Border Services Agency. And I, at the time, was doing my undergraduate degree and going to law school. And I swore I was never going to do anything with customs or immigration or international trade law ever. I was going to be a corporate commercial lawyer. That was my plan, and it didn't quite work out that way. As I started my practice, I kept getting asked by a number of people to assist them on different files that had immigration matters, you know, embedded within, and customs and trade, things like that. So one thing led to another, and I ended up having a dedicated corporate immigration practice, both in Windsor and in Troy, Michigan, for a number of years. And then I ended up being recruited by a firm in Farmington Hills, an international trade law firm, and that really exposed me to the whole global aspect of things. So not just the Canada-US border, but international trade globally in Europe, in South America, the Middle East, things like that. And so I've always worn a number of different hats, whether it was on the immigration side or the customs side of things. And then,
so are you originally from?
I'm Canadian.
Okay,
I'm
but
Canadian.
You worked in Farmington
But I
Hills
worked,
for
yes,
a while.
yeah.
Okay.
So they were looking for somebody to head up their, their global business development, and it was just a bonus to them that I was a lawyer and I had this background. So I did a number of different things for them, but I was there for about 6 years, I believe, and so I commuted every day. So I lived and breathed the experience of coming into the U.S. and then going back home. So
And how did the border thing work for you?
I'm blessed because, and I often travel, whether it's my sister or my family or friends, and every time I cross the border, they say, "How come you don't have any issues?" And I said, "Well, watch how I address the customs officers," right? And so there's a way, I believe, that you can address that experience that mitigates any problems that could ensue. So just showing deference and knowing what you should say, what you shouldn't say, and just being prepared with your documentation and being prepared with, just understanding what your rights are, but also what your obligations are.
And that's a huge conversation right
yes,
there. There's
in
so
and of
many,
itself,
absolutely,
for sure.
so many people going back and forth on the border, and I hear so many complaints in regards to, the Border Patrol asking invasive questions maybe that are not necessarily part of the process, and individuals asking, are these questions I have to answer? Exactly what you just said. What are my rights? And I want to cooperate. I want to comply. But sometimes it gets a little more invasive than rather than just what are you doing? How long are you going to be, and do you have the right documentation? So how do we address that? And if you're feeling that there is something additional that is really not necessary at the border, how does someone address that without getting themselves in trouble, basically?
Well, and that was just back to your original question in terms of, what the Institute for Border Logistics and Security was. That's a federally funded think tank that they decided with the building of the new bridge that it would make sense that we had that kind of an institute located in Windsor, Ontario, and we really focus on helping the border become a more seamless and smooth place for people to go. So whether it's the movement of goods or the movement of people, and so one of the things that we do is we try and do things like this, where we're out there and we're talking and just raising awareness, because anytime that I am speaking with people, whether it's personal movement or the business side of things, they often say, "I didn't know I needed to know that," or I didn't know I had to do that. And so I think that that's part of what happens is that, you know, the customs and immigration officers are looking for information always, right? I mean, that's what they're there for. They're there to collect data, to have an understanding of who's trying to enter into their country, or if somebody's coming back, you know, where were they and what was it that they were doing? And so I think that there are people who are automatically nervous when they approach the border. And I've worked with people who have said, you know, yes, I used to do this, or I'm a lawyer and I'm still nervous crossing, right? So it's just one of those things, like, as my children say, they don't like going to the dentist office. It's sort of that same, you know, that feeling in your stomach. But there are questions that unfortunately need to be asked because they are trying to maintain security, right? And ensure that who they are allowing in, whether it's allowing into Canada or allowing into the U.S., that they're allowing the right people in.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, you know, and I was an officer
security
for 7 years, and you're responsible. It's your badge number. It's, you know, I was in line 4, and that's who came in, let's say, and so they have a job to, you know, to maintain that security at that front line. And so I think if people understand that they're just doing their jobs, it helps, and they don't feel so, okay. But at the same time, yes, sometimes that envelope is pushed, and so I would say that the best way to handle that is to ask all of the information, okay, right then and there. So once answer all of the questions first. So make sure that they're showing deference. Whatever is being asked of them, let them address that. If they feel they were not properly addressed, or that they feel that they were treated in a way that didn't sit right with them, and people know when, you know, the next thing would be for them to go down to secondary and to request to speak to a supervisor or to a superintendent and have that conversation with them so that it's dealt with right then and there. Sometimes people escalate and they go right and they get an attorney and they go right and get a lawyer and they get in front of the media and you know, we try and say it doesn't have to get to that level. Go talk to the supervisor, talk to the superintendent, and they will sometimes help you understand. Myself, I've in the past had issues crossing into certain places because they thought I was somebody that I wasn't. And I always say, is it because I'm, you know, Middle Eastern, I'm Lebanese? And they say, no, actually, we thought you were Colombian. We thought you were South American. And we, you know, you match this lookout of somebody that we were looking for, right? So, you know, if it's going to happen to me, which I live and breathe this stuff every day, I say it could happen to anybody. But that's my first suggestion, is go and talk to a supervisor and let them, because they have protocols that they go through, and they'll try and address it and make you feel at least better or understand what went on. So at that point,
what are some of the inappropriate questions that someone should watch out for? You know, they've asked, how many kids do you have? You know, how much do you weigh? Those kinds of, you know, sort of questions that you can't really connect to the security process, and I believe that's, you know, that there's a balance there. Security comes first, absolutely. But when you look at the Border Patrol incidences that have happened, more so with individuals who very innocently are going back and forth, who are treated in that way, how do you address that? And you said, you know, talk to the superintendent, but what about training for the patrol officers? Has that been something that has been focused on, adhered to, and how do you address those things? Because it is personality, it's character, and it's really the connectivity between the patrol individual and the person trying to cross. So it's sort of a public relations issue, it's a human issue, and it's a relationship issue.
So, you know, having been an officer prior to and then during and after 9/11, I can tell you that, at least on the Canadian side, you know, things have changed a lot. The dynamics have changed a lot, but they also have received a significant amount of training, sensitivity training, diversity training. Unfortunately, there is profiling that occurs to a certain degree. And what do I mean by that? If we're looking for somebody who matches a certain description based on intelligence that was received, let's say, they're acting upon that, okay? Yeah, they shouldn't be asking how much you weigh, and they shouldn't be asking, details that don't make sense. And so that's where I'm saying that you know, if you say to yourself, okay, they're asking me what's in my trunk, they're asking me where we all came from, they might smell something in the vehicle, they're looking to see, is everybody looking at them? Do the people in the vehicle look scared to talk to them? Okay, and that's probably one of the
body language,
right?
That they have to
and
look
so
for.
they're picking up on
Absolutely.
that, and the
Yes.
training that you know all officers on any border receive has a lot to do with what's everyone else doing. So a lot of times, one of the misconceptions is the driver will say, "Okay, nobody say anything." And the driver's going to address,
Right,
okay,
right.
and,
All right, we're going through. Everybody, quiet.
right, you know, and you know, even myself, I was driving over one time with my sons, and the officer said, "Who is the person driving?" And they were trying to understand that I was not kidnapping these children, that they were in fact my children. And my son said, "That's Lori Tanous." And the officer said, "No, no, no. Who is she to you?" And he says, "That's Lori Tanous." And so the officer's getting frustrated, and we're coming into the United States, and so the officer says, "Son, I'm asking you, who is she to you?" So my older son says, "It's our mom." Okay. And so, but they were quiet, but they were thinking that the officer wanted to make sure that I was who my identification said I was.
Right.
Okay, that's what my son thought, right? So there's situations like that. And so after that, I said, "Guys, don't be afraid to talk to the officers," you know? And they said, "Well, we didn't know we could talk to the officers," right? And so I think that there's just, you know, there has to be that awareness of knowing that they're looking not just at the driver, they're not looking at, you know, whether you're tapping your fingers on the driver's, you know, on the steering wheel, but they're looking at smells, they're looking for sounds, they're looking at what everyone is doing in the vehicle, those interactions. And so if there is a something that causes reasonable doubt that this person is not where they said they were or what they were doing, then those other questions that are sort of like, that's where that line gets blurred, right?
And they have such a huge responsibility.
Yes.
This is the security of
sure.
both borders. So obviously they're under pressure as well. So what would you recommend for someone going through the border who are being asked different kinds of questions, weight questions, you know, numbers questions, questions that really aren't related to what they're doing? Is it something that they need to cooperate with, or do they have the right to say, you know, "Excuse me, are you asking me these questions for a reason, or are they obligated to answer?"
So at first instance, I'm going to say they're obligated to answer because the officer has to finish his or her interview. There's a reason, and that's where I'm saying that they're not just looking at you and saying, "I want to know what you weigh." They're, you know, the car might be weighing a little heavily on one side, okay? And, you know, just again from my experience, because there were too many, you know, cases of alcohol in a trunk one day. And so I'm looking, going, okay, the people in this vehicle, their weight does not match up to how much this vehicle is sitting low, right? And so they're trained to look at those things. So I would say answer the questions, you know, let the officer finish his interview. If you're not comfortable, go in and talk to the supervisor. If it doesn't get addressed properly there, then I would say make sure when you leave there, you take notes of everything that occurred. The detail, you know, the essence is in the detail. So I was asked this, I answered this. I was asked this, I was, you know, and I didn't feel, or I felt like I was being highlighted, or I felt like I was being discriminated against. And then you can talk to, there are a number of different, whether it's the consulates, whether it's the, there are, you know, on the website, there are complaints, a place where you can call in or, you know, send in your concerns. You can also get a lawyer if you feel that, you know, you need to have somebody be that liaison between the government agency if it gets to that point. But, you know, the one thing that I recommend is before people jump ahead and make a claim of discrimination or of,
think it through.
You know, think it through, because you're going to have to come through that border again. Okay, and people don't forget. I mean, I recall clearly being there. Like I said, I was there for 7 years, and people that made complaints based on the fact that I found suspicious behavior going on in their vehicle, and then they've just, you know, caused themselves an issue that's going to recur every time that they cross, right? So
Correct.
I would just say that, you know, be prepared, show deference, because that's key. And I don't mean, you know, kiss up. I mean, you know, what would
Cooperate.
you cooperate? Take your sunglasses off. Look at them in the eye. Lower your music. Roll down both of your windows, and cooperate. And I think if people just start off at that premise, they're going to find a much different experience. Okay?
I agree, and I think that is really an issue, because when you do go into that situation, people are a little bit nervous.
Yes,
as is.
as I was saying,
and
like
so it is about cooperation, and I'm glad that you put it that way, because I believe that a lot of the interactions that happen are a lot more personal than they are anything else.
For sure,
and so,
it is invasive.
As individuals, we do want the security system to work for all of us, and so cooperating with that and answering those questions is really the best way to go, especially if you don't have anything to worry about.
And that's what I say to people. At the end of the day, I speak at a lot of different conferences, and I always end with one slide, and I say maximum compliance equals maximum facilitation. And so they're like, what do you mean by that? And I said, if people just go there and they're compliant from the get-go, they're going to find that they're let go so much easier. The incidents of them being pulled in are going to be fewer and fewer. And I hate to say it, but sometimes the ones that are screaming the loudest have something to hide. Okay, and so that's, so again, be aware of your surroundings, and that self-awareness is really key in terms of what smells are coming out of my vehicle, what other sounds are happening, what are the rest of my passengers saying or doing, and does my story match? And so a lot of times people would say, well, I wasn't lying, I really was only, just there for the weekend, and I have the receipts to prove it. And so then by the time you go through your exam and you realize that they were lying, and then that person comes through again, now they're on the defense. And so it's a whole story, and the pieces of the puzzle all sort of come together, right?
Sure.
So
compliance, cooperation really on both ends.
Yes,
and
correct.
And that message
correct.
needs to get out
and then,
there.
in terms of I have seen that we've come a long way in terms of officers being understanding of people from different cultures, different races, different religions. Do we have a long way to go? Of course we do. I think as people we do, let alone as enforcement. But it's
unfortunately the environment in our world is
the geopolitical situation that we're in right now is one that's ever changing, constantly moving, and so it's hard for, I think, everybody to keep up with the changes and just to stay on top of things.
Right now, the hat that you're wearing is in regards to commerce with Windsor, import, export, and to increase that economic vitality within Windsor, to have those relationships more so internationally and more of a diverse economic platform. What are you doing with that, and what's the conversation, and how are you moving forward with that, and how are you competing with the U.S.?
Well, we do have the good fortune, I would say, of and I do travel a lot, and I'm in different countries, and they, are you American or are you Canadian? I say I'm Canadian, but it's like I'm American. I'm there 4 or 5 times a week, and so it's all good. But no, one of the things that we're looking to do is saying, how can we, Canada and the U.S., be more globally competitive against the rest of the world? So not just looking, it's a partnership,
Absolutely.
not just this is Canada or this is Windsor, because for us, 4 hours up the 401 is Toronto. 10 minutes across that bridge or that tunnel is this metropolitan area that is a slew of customers, of clients, of potential stakeholders and relationships that we could build upon. So,
they say it doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in; it just matters the neighbor that you have.
Right? No, it's true. That's very, very true. So some of the things that we've been working on is, as I said, we're doing a lot of outreach. We're doing a lot of conferences, and I speak whether it's in Washington or in Ottawa. I've gone down to Mexico City, to Panama, doing a lot of saying, hey, this is who we are, and this is what we can do. And when I'm out there selling, I don't just sell Windsor. I say, and here's Michigan, and this is what we have right across that border. So come to this region, pick one. We don't care, because you're going to end up doing business with both. And so what we're trying to do, again, is explain to people, because there is a lot of myths, if we can call them that, about how difficult it may be to come to Canada, okay, or to do business in Canada. And so one of the things I try and do is demystify that process for, business people or investors, and say, okay, here are the steps that are involved. And even I do a lot of that in Michigan and Ohio, and say, okay, if you were to come to Canada, here are the 5 steps for you in terms of setting up your corporation, finding a potential investor or a potential partner, and here are ways, especially with the dollar the way it is right now, it makes sense for Americans to be doing business in Canada. You get your labor cheaper, you can get your assets are 30% off automatically, right?
It's 30% right
and
now.
And it's going to hover around there for some time, is what economists are saying. So just really trying to get that message out there that we are open for business, and that it's not as difficult as people may think it is to come in and work with us.
Where are you focusing on? What countries are you focusing on in terms of increased trade?
So right now, the United States and Mexico are our focal areas. We've had some key dignitaries from Mexico come and visit us. We're looking at ways to say, all right, despite the fact that many of our manufacturing jobs may have left to Mexico, there are
to get those
the
back
brain
somehow.
power, though, yes, but the brain power, I believe, resides in Windsor, in this metropolitan area, because of the skill sets that we've had all of these years, because of the manufacturing industry. A lot of the designs for those tools are still designed here in this area. Okay, they're being built perhaps there, but the design element, that brain power, is happening here. So I guess what I'm saying is how do we take that and flip that and say what other types of maybe advanced manufacturing or in the robotics or in other fields could we expand that skill set and that knowledge into those other industries and build upon that together, again, as a collective, not as individual siloed countries. So right now we're really focusing on the Windsor-Detroit area being a global gateway, and we're focusing on Latin America. So Panama, Colombia, Mexico is really what we're focusing on at this point in time. With the TPP, so the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that's going to open up a whole other,
venue, sure.
Yeah, trade lanes that we haven't experienced before, both in the Asia Pacific and in Europe. So that's something that we're looking to, but I expect not for another year we'll be, starting to work on those types of things. So right now we are really focusing on the U.S. and the Latin American market as big ones for us.
The bridge situation, the tunnel situation, the transportation back and forth. Where are we with that? Maddie Maroon, the entire concept of the toll and trying to get back and forth. What's the latest on that?
So at this point in time, the latest, there was a public meeting that was held last week, I believe it was, held by the Windsor Bridge Authority, and they are proceeding with the building of the new Gordie Howe Bridge. The RFP is going to be out soon enough. I think if it was up to all of us who are immersed in this world, we'd love to see one authority govern both bridges. But at this point in time, there is, I believe, Mr. Maroon is still looking to have his bridge twin spanned. That's the latest that we have on that. But as far as the Gordie Howe Bridge, they are going full steam ahead in building that bridge and doing what needs to be done to get that ready. And we're excited about it for a number of reasons, basically because of the automation and the new technology that we're going to see come with that and make that process of crossing that border an easier one, we're hoping.
Well, that's amazing. You're also international trade consulting. You are the Vice President of Government Relations.
Yes, at Faro. So
At
Faro
Faro
is a customs brokerage. It's a freight forwarder. We do international trade consulting, and so I'm their Vice President of Government Relations, and so I'm essentially the liaison between our multinational clients and various government agencies. And so we have a lot of changes that have been occurring, both with Customs and Border Protection and Canada Border Services Agency. They're all moving towards a single window initiative, and so this automated world. And so for many clients who are sort of uncertain about what that change means to them, one of the things that I do is help translate what those changes will mean, what the impact will be onto them in terms of the movement of, their goods across borders all over the world. So,
well, you do wear different hats, but they are definitely interlocked.
Everything's intermingled, most
in
certainly.
regards to government relations, import-export, border patrol. It all makes a lot of sense. Really quick, we've had the issue, and I know this isn't something that you directly deal with, but the issue of the Syrian refugees in regards to coming into the U.S. and Canada. Mm-hmm. What is your perspective on that? I know that coming into the United States, they are extremely, extremely vetted, and it takes months and months and months in order to have them come in. And I think it's the same as Canada. But what is the balance there? And is it a little bit easier maybe in Canada than the U.S., or what has been your experience?
I think it's definitely easier right now, especially with our Trudeau administration, the new new power, political power, who has really said we need to be here and we are Canadian and we've got to stick to who we say that we are on that global stage, that human element. And so I believe that what we've seen across Canada is, let's just open up our arms and let's figure this out. There was some hesitancy at first in terms of how are we going to get through all these security procedures, the security clearance? But they managed to say, okay, it doesn't mean we're going to have, less security. It's just they were expediting it for the big group that was coming over, and that they do come over. Every week we're hearing stories. And a lot of them are children, and so they haven't served in various political, powers, which that's obviously the concern. So, we definitely, I think, it's a little bit easier in Canada than in the United States in that sense, but we still have the same security clearance, and that does take a long time, unfortunately, but only because they have to go back to those villages where these people are coming from and say, where did you work, who were you cooperating with, what side of the house were you working with, and now so much has been destroyed that it's really hard to track that information down. So, they're working, again, globally to try and collect that data so that they can expedite those clearances, in a better fashion. I would say I think that Canada is doing a good job of keeping that human factor in terms of, trying to keep our doors open and respectful of the fact that we all came from somewhere else, and can we, just be more understanding and sympathetic and compassionate about it. So.
Absolutely, and I think that's so important to find that balance between security and understanding
it's
and
two
compassion.
Sides of one coin, really.
It is a catastrophic human tragedy, and we have to focus on that, but still trying to keep our borders as safe as possible. Lori Tanous, thank you so much for being here on Community Connection, and a wonderful conversation. I think it was very useful for individuals crossing those borders. Be compliant, and facilitation will find your way. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.